If there was ever a guy who just enjoyed scaring people and being bad for the sake of being bad and evil, it is this week's topic, Richard Ramirez. A pretty famous serial killer, probably up there with guys like Bundy and John Wayne Gacy and all that, just in terms of the most recognizable names that even people who aren't super into this sort of stuff would be like, oh yeah, I've heard of him. And this week we are going to look at his whole story to see just why he was the big old creeper that he was. It's Our Weird World.
Our Weird World.
Hello and welcome to Our Weird World. I don't know why I'm doing it like that. That was weird. Welcome to Our Weird World. I'm your host, John Henson. Just right before we get into it, thank you for show's been growing a little bit more lately. Got a lot of people pointing out that they listen. So thanks, I guess. They didn't say whether or not they enjoyed it. They just said, hey, I've been listening to your show. And that's probably not like the greatest, vote of confidence, but you know what? You're listening and that's great. All right. And I appreciate that. If it's not your cup of tea, that's fine. Go be boring somewhere else, I guess. But this week we're looking at the story of Richard Ramirez, super famous serial killer. I already kind of set it up in the cold open, so no need to repeat myself. Let's just go ahead and jump into story time. Richard Ramirez was the final child born to Julian and Mercedes Ramirez. Maybe it's Julian. Julian. I don't know. One of them. But he was born in El Paso, Texas on February 29th, 1960. When Richard was 2 years old, an old dresser fell on top of him. I don't know how that happens. Like, in my experience, dressers are pretty sturdy, right? Pretty heavy. Got a bunch of clothes in them. 4 legs, all right? They don't typically fall over very easily unless one of the top couple of drawers are pulled out, then maybe it'll topple over. But still, 2 years old, to have a whole dresser fall on you, not great, all right? Especially when it leaves a huge gash on his head that required 30 stitches to close. Even more, 3 years later, Richard was then knocked unconscious when he fell off of a swing or he got hit by a swing at a local park. We're not really sure. I mean, look, it was the early 60s. It was probably like one of those swings that just had that thick wooden plank as the seat. And so, you get thwacked in the head with that, it's going to do some damage. Also, Richard's father was very abusive, and Richard actually began sleeping in the local cemetery to get away from him and to prevent himself from taking more hits to the head, right? Because he's taken some serious brain damage so far as a child, which makes a lot of sense as to how he ended up, right? By age 10, Richard was best friends with his older cousin Miguel, who let him smoke weed, told him stories from his time in Vietnam, which also included some visuals of some Polaroids that Miguel had taken of women who had been decapitated but had also been raped by Miguel. So not like a great influence, all right? I like to think that I was at least somewhat of a positive influence on my cousin. I didn't really talk to my older cousins that much, but I talked to my younger cousin a lot. And I feel like I didn't make him a worse person. And I think that's what we can all hope for in life. Miguel, on the other hand, he's just letting his little 10-year-old cousin smoke weed. He's showing pictures of women that he has raped and decapitated and probably raped after they were decapitated. So, not great. He was also teaching Richard some of the combat skills that he had learned in basic training, such as how to kill with stealth and actually make sure that you killed someone. And honestly, that's not even the worst part. When Richard was 13, he literally watched Miguel shoot his wife, Jessie, in the face with his pistol after the two got into an argument. And then after the incident, Richard went on to live with his older sister Ruth and her husband Roberto, who was a habitual peeping Tom. So, like, there's no one in this kid's family who's remotely a decent person, right? You have one guy who not only was raping and decapitating Vietnamese people, but then just straight up shot his wife point blank in the face in front of him. And then he goes and lives with Uncle Bush Creeper, who's just out looking at people putting their underwear on through their window. I guess that's what a peeping Tom does. I mean, I'm sure they do other things. But when Richard wasn't accompanying Roberto on his peeping trips, because of course he was doing LSD and getting really deep into Satanism. Now, I feel like I should clarify something here, because I think most people who don't tend to dig into these sorts of things just take things at face value and create their entire worldview on them, which is a lot of people that I know. Satanism, at least as it is supposed to be practiced, is not like worship of an actual devil. It's more or less like anarchy and like just this sort of flippant, apathetic view of religious structure and the world. All right. It's like, it's really like somehow kind of in the middle between like hardcore, fervent religious people, generally Christians, especially in America, because that's what you got here. But then also like super hardcore, like atheist people, where it's like they just make fun of both sides. Like the entire concept to a Satanist is just live your life. Like, why are you wasting and putting so much time and energy into these structures and these sorts of concepts and constructs where you have no idea whether or not they're actually even real? Generally, probably not. But Richard Ramirez, because, all the brain damage, he was taking it actually very literally. Like, he was like, Satan, hail Satan, like even Satanist, if you asked a Satanist about Richard Ramirez and how Richard Ramirez practiced Satanism, they would be like, yeah, he's crazy. Like, he's not one of us. All right. But as Richard got older, all right, he's doing all this stuff. He began combining the images of Miguel's Vietnamese adventures with his own twisted sexual fantasies. And this is what's crazy. Like, he got his first job at a local Holiday Inn, where he then began using his master key to sneak into guest rooms while they slept and steal their stuff. All right. That's horrifying, which that's also probably now why they have like the deadbolt, not the deadbolt, but the little, I don't know what you call it, but the other lock on the hotel door, to where like, even if someone does have a key and they try to open the door, it only, goes so far. He then, obviously that job didn't last very long, because mainly Richard was caught attempting to rape a guest's wife. And that's going to get you fired pretty quickly. All right. I don't care where you're working. You try to rape someone while on the job, you're probably going to get fired. All right. The husband, who was in the room, I guess, beat this dude to a pulp. Honestly, I'm a little frustrated that he didn't beat him to death, because that would have solved all of this problem. This story would have been over. But, unfortunately, even worse, like all of the charges against Ramirez ended up being dropped because the couple lived out of state and they refused to come back and testify, which, like, I get it from an objective standpoint. All right. Like, I get that, like, if your accuser does not want to make the effort to come back and testify, regardless of how much evidence is against you, they have to drop the charges. Like, that's just the rule. It sucks, but I get it. All right. In 1982, Richard then moved to San Francisco, and 2 years later, he murdered 9-year-old Mei Leong. Why do I gotta say it like that? It's a little Asian girl, all right, in a hotel basement. And really, like, murder here is a very soft term, right? Because he beat this girl, raped her, and then stabbed her a bunch of times before hanging her body from a water pipe, all right? And that, at that point, like, Richard was like, Yes, this is my calling in life. I don't know why he sounds like that, but that's what we're going with. Right? I must kill more people. Why is he Italian? And so on June 28th of that year, 1982, he then went out and killed Jenny Vincow by stabbing her to death with her throat. Like, he slashed this woman's throat so deeply, like he nearly decapitated her. And I mean, I get it. Like, old people, neck, thinner skin, less muscle to deal with, probably easier to nearly decapitate an 80-year-old woman than it would be like a 20-year-old woman. Like, makes sense, but still really hardcore. And he's also gone from a 9-year-old girl to a 79-year-old woman. He's gone to a 70-year age disparity, which is not what a normal serial killer does. All right. They tend to have a very specific profile, but it is what it is. And a year later, Richard then shot 22-year-old Maria Hernandez in the face. And however, here's what's crazy. She survived because she was actually a superhero. Kind of. All right. Mainly, it was more so that she got really lucky because she, like, when Richard shot her, she, like, went to, like, brace her face or, like, cover her face, and her car key somehow got in the line of the bullet and it deflected it. So, like, it just kind of grazed her face. And that's really lucky because you think about a car key, pretty small, right? Bullets, even smaller. So to block a bullet with a car key, crazy luck, all right? Or you're a superhero and you're just, like, doing the Matrix stuff where you can, like, catch bullets. And I don't know. She probably wasn't doing that. Her roommate also then heard that gunshot and ducked behind the kitchen counter as Richard broke into the house because he thinks Maria is dead. So now he's going inside to kill the roommate. And of course, when the roommate kind of peeked her head up to check things out, Richard saw her, pow, right between the eyes. No car keys to deflect that one, right? Just about an hour after Richard Ramirez had attacked Hernandez and her roommate, Richard then shot 30-year-old Veronica Yu, and she ended up dying after arriving at the hospital. And all of this is happening in one night. Like, he is just going around town killing a bunch of people. All right. This is on June 28th. So he's killed this 79-year-old woman. He then goes, shoots Maria Hernandez. She somehow survives, but he kills her roommate. Then goes and kills this 30-year-old woman. And the news is all over it. All right. Hernandez, she survived, gave a description of her attacker, of this creepy, gross-looking dude with bulging eyes and rotting teeth. And he really did have rotting teeth because Richard just basically had a full diet of candy. That's all he really ever ate. And he just did not give much attention to his overall personal hygiene. So when you mix a diet exclusively of candy with not brushing your teeth are going to have you're going to have a bad time, right? They're going to start falling out. You're going to get a bunch of cavities. It's going to be bad. And the composite sketch started getting plastered all over California television broadcast. 10 days later, Richard returned back to a home in Whittier, California that he had robbed a year before and killed 64-year-old Vincent Zazzara in his sleep. Now, Vincent's wife, right? She was woken up, Maxine. She was woken by the sound of her husband getting shot, as I think most people would, right? I don't care how deep of a sleeper you are. Someone gets shot point blank right beside you, probably going to wake you up, right? And so she rolls over, sees that her husband has now been shot in the face, and also she is now getting punched in the face by Ramirez. And while he's punching her, Richard's like, where is your valuable? Where are the jewels? Where are the family jewels? Where are your expensive items that I can steal and pawn and make a money off of? I don't know what accent that is, and I'm sorry, but that's what he's doing. And Maxine finally told him, I guess in between punches, and Richard then tied her up and just started ransacking the house, getting all the things that he was looking for. However, Maxine quickly broke out of her restraints and grabbed the spare shotgun from under her bed, because that's the thing about old people. They sleep with shotguns under their beds. All right. My grandparents do it. So, it's true. And here's the best part of the story. She goes down the hallway, finds Richard just rifling through the drawers and just boom, splatters this dude's brains all over the wall. All right. And that's the end of the story. Nope, just kidding. That's not true, because if you knew anything about the story, you know that was not true. The gun actually wasn't even loaded. I don't think Maxine knew that. And because of that, Richard then shot her 3 times with his .22 pistol. He then grabbed the biggest knife he could find out of the kitchen and stabbed her several times. And just for like that little extra flavor, he then gouged out her eyeballs and put them in a jewelry box. Why? Why do you have to go that far? All right. Stabbing her to death, I get that. All right. Everything after that, literally overkill. I think that's the literal definition of overkill. And here's the thing, like, no one's remotely close to catching this guy. And so over the next 4 months, Richard then sneaked into several houses and just raped and shot people. All right. And each attack was just slightly different from the last, and which is why a lot of times police had a hard time connecting them all together, because again, serial killers, they have a pattern, right? They have a specific kind of people they attack, or a specific kind of person they attack. They have a specific kind of way of killing that person. Richard, he's just all over the greater San Francisco area, all willy-nilly, just shooting and stabbing and doing all sorts of things, whatever he feels like at the time. Sometimes he would bludgeon someone with a hammer. Maybe sometimes he would shock someone to death with like live electrical wire, which is crazy. Sometimes he would draw pentagrams on a victim's thigh with her own lipstick, right? Sometimes he would beat an old lady to death with a lamp, or maybe he would just make the surviving victims swear to Satan that they had given him everything of value before then sparing their life and leaving the house. Like, just no rhyme or reason. He was just being a bad dude for the sake of being a bad dude. On one occasion, Richard attempted to strangle a 16-year-old girl to death with a telephone cord, but when the cord started shooting sparks, like, he kind of loosened his grip a little bit, because, I mean, that's a weird thing to happen, and the girl then started to breathe again. Richard actually ran away thinking that Jesus had intervened to save the girl's life. And that's how you know you're taking your Satanism literally too seriously, right? When you think, like, and also, like, just the idea of you willingly worshiping the bad guy in the story. Bad guy never wins. Traditional story arc, not a single time in any story ever has the bad guy won. But Richard, he's like, I don't know. These M&Ms are tasty. Also, Satan's the best. Literally Lucifer. He's a real dude, 100%. He rules over hell. I think he's cool. I'm going to worship him. And I'm going to root for Satan. Does he win in the end? I don't know. I haven't gotten that far in the Bible yet. Probably, because he seems like a cool dude. And so he's strangling this girl to death. And somehow sparks begin flying out of the cord, which is pretty sweet. And then Richard, in his dumb brain-damaged brain, is like, oh no, man. Jesus is coming back. I don't know what accent I'm doing right now. He's coming back and he's saving this girl, man. So I gotta go. Because I'm not going to win. But sometimes Satan going to win. And I don't know. I don't know what, hit the microphone. I don't know what accent that was, and I'm sorry. On August 24th, 1985, Richard, who by this time had just blazed this trail of terror up and down the California coast, stole a car and drove down to Mission Viejo, where he attempted to break into the home of James Romero Jr. However, Romero's 13-year-old son heard Richard's footsteps outside and went to wake up his parents and tell him what was going on. Richard figured it out. He ran away, but Romero was actually able to run outside and write down the make, model, and color of the car that Richard was driving in, as well as parts of the license plate. But rather than go home, kind of regroup, all right, come up with a new plan, Richard just kind of drove down the street and broke into another home where he shot 30-year-old Bill Carnes 3 times in the head. He then turned to Bill's fiancée, Inez Erickson, and informed her that he was the Night Stalker. And by this time, that was the nickname that had been given to him by several media outlets. Everyone in California knew who this guy was, right? And he like tells her, he's like, hey, I am the Night Stalker. And then he politely requested that she profess her love to Satan as he was punching her in the face, which I don't know how deranged do you have to be to like expect someone to carry on a conversation with you as you are actively punching him in the face? It's just like, hey, I am the Night Stalker. Tell me you love Satan. Do it. Do it, whore. Tell me you love Satan. Oh, man, that's funny. After then raping her a few times, which, I hate that I'm laughing like right before I say that. But after raping her a few times, Richard then stole all of the valuables in the house and he left. All right. So he kept her alive after killing her fiance. Once Richard was gone, Erickson then got out and ran to a neighbor's house for help. Bill, I told you he was dead. He was not dead. I lied. He somehow survived getting shot. And Erickson was able to give a detailed description of her attacker. Even more, police also found a footprint belonging to Ramirez that was inside the house. I don't know how they do that. I mean, I don't know if it was like a shoe print or a dude was just barefooting it through the house. Who knows? 4 days later, the stolen car that Richard had driven to Mission Viejo was then found in Los Angeles. And there, police collected a fingerprint from the rearview mirror, which was the stop eating right before you record. All right. I'm 115 some odd episodes in. Haven't learned that yet. All right. Podcasts are like pools. You have to wait 30 minutes before you go in. And yet, still I do this. Anyway, police collected a fingerprint from the rearview mirror, which was successfully connected to Richard because he had been arrested prior for just like some petty crime or whatever. Police then released a mugshot from that prior arrest because, I mean, obviously California police going to give everybody a freebie. And now the entire state knew who exactly the Night Stalker was. 3 days later, Richard arrived at a bus station after taking a small vacation to Tucson, Arizona to visit his brother, and literally just walked past several police officers who were on a stakeout to catch him. Because of course they wouldn't notice him. I don't know if it's a coincidence that there were just so many serial killers in California in the 70s and 80s, or if it was because police were just so bad at their job that it just allowed so many of these dudes to kill as many people as they did. Because Richard Ramirez literally walks past all of these cops who are literally on a stakeout to look for him. Don't notice him at all. I don't know what they were doing. All right. Richard then goes into a convenience store where several Mexican ladies recognized him immediately. Walks past cops, no idea. 3 Mexican ladies in a convenience store. Oh no, that's a him. All right. And fearfully pointed him out to everybody. And at that moment, Richard then realized like his face is literally plastered everywhere. There is wanted signs for him everywhere. And so he runs for it. All right. He runs out of the convenience store, goes across several lanes of Interstate 5 and tries to actually carjack a woman on the interstate, which is crazy. It's a ballsy move. Several good Samaritans see what's happening and they chase him off the interstate. He tried 2 more carjackings, but was then taken down by a group of bystanders and hit on the head with a metal bar, which, given his past injury history, solid move, and subdues him. And a few minutes later, police come and haul him off to jail. Richard's trial was almost as insane as his actual crime spree. At his first appearance, Richard greeted the court by raising his hand and showing a pentagram that he had kind of carved into it and was just yelling, "Hail Satan," as many times and as loudly as he could. The court also had to then be fitted with metal detectors because a rumor had gotten out that Richard was going to smuggle a gun into the courtroom and shoot the prosecutor. The trial was then interrupted after one of the jurors was found shot to death in her apartment. This horrified the rest of the jurors because they then immediately believed that Richard had somehow orchestrated the hit, which I don't know how you do that because jurors are supposed to be completely impartial and neutral, but this kind of eliminated all of that impartiality, but whatever. That it ended up actually being completely unrelated. Like the police quickly determined that juror had been shot by her boyfriend in kind of this murder-suicide, but no, Richard orchestrated it. And so you got to restart everything. 2 months after his trial began, Richard was convicted of 13 murders, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. At the time, it was the most expensive trial in California history until it was surpassed by the O.J. Simpson trial 5 years later. Obviously, Richard was sentenced to death in the gas chamber. When he was read his sentence, they asked him, "Hey, what do you think about that?" And Richard goes, "Big deal. Death always went with the territory. See you in Disneyland." Like, why is he going to Disneyland? As Richard awaited execution, and this is what's really frustrating to me out of all of this, he developed a relationship with a woman named Doreen Leoy, who is a clearly deranged, sad young lady who was not given enough attention as a child. And after writing Richard over 70 letters, he then proposed to her, and the two were married on October 3rd, 1996. Doreen actually ended up telling people that she was going to commit suicide on the day Richard was executed, but then the two ended up getting divorced, which is funny. Richard ended up dying on June 7th, 2013 from complications due to lymphoma, as well as chronic substance abuse and hepatitis C. And that is the end of his story. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, another product of shoddy California police work, and also a lot of brain damage and a bad childhood. All right. Like, and what's crazy is, like, in terms of serial killer stories, like, that's pretty standard, right? There's an obvious pattern: abusive family and or brain damage as a child, followed by, like, commits a murder and was like, yeah, this is good. This is for me. Followed by a string of murders, coupled with a lot of police ineptitude, followed by eventual capture, crazy trial, and then death. And so it was one of the more famous ones just because there was the whole Satanist element to it. There was a big satanic panic going on in the 80s that really probably fed into this. And just so all sorts of factors, it just made this one of the more notable serial killers. And so with that, let's see what we learned today.
What did we learn?
Number one, if you go to a foreign country, whether it be in a war or just as a vacation, and you end up raping and decapitating some of the local women, all right, first of all, don't take pictures of it. Second of all, don't bring the pictures back. And third, and maybe most importantly, don't show them to, like, your 10-year-old highly impressionable cousin, all right? Keep it to yourself, all right? Let's just say that we lived in a world where raping and decapitating foreign women was okay. It isn't, but let's say that it was. Keep it to yourself, all right? Let that just be a little memory that you keep for yourself, all right, for the rest of your life. You don't need to show anybody that, all right? Number two, Richard Ramirez, he ended up being known as the Night Stalker, real famous, super into candy, and not super into brushing his teeth, all right? And number three, he was a literal Satanist, not how almost all Satanists are. Dude literally was just like, go Satan, go, do, just cheering Satan on, even though Satan's not real. And also that Satan, if he was real, loses in the end. But, like, it's brain damage. That is brain damage logic, right? But that is not what a real Satanist believes. And I'm not going to go into a whole episode on Satanism. You can look it up for yourself. It's really not a big deal, all right? next week on Our Weird World, it's going to be a reality check for some of you liberal snowflakes out there. Yeah, I know I go hard on stuff like gun control and being a decent human being and other things that like people on the right think are stupid, but I don't know why I said it like that. But no, next week we are going to look at some stories of some failed utopias. All right. People just want to, man, we should just be communal living, man, and full socialism where everyone contributes equally to the best of their abilities and everything works out perfectly, man. Like, no, it doesn't. All right. It's not how it works. You need structure. You need a hierarchy. It's just how it goes. It sucks, but that's how most of us have to live, all right? And we're going to look at 3 stories of places that tried to do it differently and realized pretty quickly it's not going to work out, all right? We're going to look at the stories of the towns of Brook Farm, Fruitlands, and Home. The first 2 happened in Massachusetts. The last one happened in Washington State. And we're going to see, what they tried to do and why it didn't work out. And so that'll be fun for everyone. So thank you all for listening. Keep telling all your friends and keep it weird.